potential for the seed grants, because with a little bit of money, you can get started. And then the idea is try to make the case to the institution on that ROI. The money we have now comes from just the institution allocated scholarship program. So we don't rely on grant monies if we get them, or if we have anything unexpected, that's great and we can offset it. But that $200,000 is just now part of the institution's allocation. We don't rely on anything else. Anything else becomes, you know, icing on the cake. So that cost can really, it really pays for itself. I guess what I'm saying, it's really can be low-hanging fruit that pays for itself. Now, personnel-wise, as Tim was talking about, we keep it very nimble, so we do not spend a lot of money. We keep it small and nimble and easy to allocate, and then easy to sustain once we set up the metrics, and then we just move it into the way that, into people's everyday work, so it does not cost a lot of money on the personnel side.
We have a very similar setup where it resides within our existing structure. However, it has created some additional costs in our advancement office because now you have our community seeking to give in this manner. And so I guess that was an unintended benefit of fundraising when there's a need that can be addressed. And you have many individuals who would like to develop this as a concept as they support our institution.
Any other questions, follow-up questions as I keep moving? I don't want to cut anyone off. Okay. So I guess we mentioned, well, actually, do any of you have ideas about revenue sources for this type of grant? I know you all spoke about where your revenues came from, but do you have other suggestions for other campuses?
The one thing I would throw out there as a potential revenue source that we're just not developing is this is a mechanism to engage young alumni back with your institution because young alums do not have necessarily the capital to give at large amounts, but because of their relationship with the student experience, this is a way and a type of program that they would bode well for them to participate in and they can see an instant return in their investment back to the institution.
Any others? Okay.
We wish.
Yeah, we all need ideas for revenue sources. What about, what have you found to be some of the biggest roadblocks? Can you talk a little bit about that? Kind of things you faced in doing this, lessons learned that you've come across from this process?
I can start. I feel like I'm going to be a little repetitive here. We actually don't have a lot of roadblocks on this one, and I'm going to just keep going back to it. It's because it's the argument's easy to make given the return that we have seen. But very initially, I'll go back to what you heard a little bit was this idea of, you know, students might game the system. You know, where's the initial money going to come from? Because that initial roadblock for us was getting enough behind us where we could demonstrate that ROI so that then it was simple. But initially, you know, you have a little bit of work to do to make sure you're setting it up, to make sure you have those metrics and you can get some support or some dollars to start with until you can make the case that it really, you know, frankly, the case we make all the time is if you don't do it, you're actually going to lose money on the bottom line. So, but to get there, we had to have some initial dollars to start with to show that, and we had to deal with and just walk through and talk through some of those barriers around, you know, are we really giving it to the right students? And if we give it to them, though, you know, even our financial aid office honestly had that initial, well, you know, but if you give it to them, then they won't have to work hard to try to get that money, and they probably could if you didn't give it to them. But the truth is, we give it in the same way that Tim talked about at Georgia State. It's really at that point that there's clear unmet need that we've established. Students are about to be dropped from classes, or they have been dropped from classes. We kind of go on both sides of that. And we do a lot of analysis to make sure that we're touching the students we need to touch.
I'll mention, well, first I want to support what Stacy is saying, that we've launched a number of programs at Georgia State. This was not one of the more difficult ones to launch. It went smoothly. We got good data coming in after one semester. It helped create buy-in and so forth. I will mention the one additional challenge feature that hasn't come up so far, which is we had to think through the auditing part of it. This is a lot of money that's exchanging hands. And what we ultimately did after the first couple semesters is have to ensure for our university auditors that there were enough checks and balances to make sure that this money wasn't being distributed based on the decision of a single individual, because then that increases the likelihood that because of friends or family relations and so forth, that something inappropriate might happen. So you might want to think through that as you set up the programs, is what is the decision-making procedure, and will it pass audit standards for your campus and university?
For our loan converting to grant program, not a roadblock, but challenges in the initial iteration was how much money could we give out, and what happened if no one graduated, and would we have enough grant to cover that? And how much can we give out in loan that has to be repaid over time before we maxed out our pool for loans? So that's a bit of a challenge of doing predictive modeling when you haven't done something before. Again, because it's a loan, we had to work with our student loan administration division to make sure that we were compliant with all the requirements with the promissory note, and did full disclosure and helped the students understand what the repayment model would be. So it's just getting all of that information and getting it approved and make sure everybody agrees before you implement something.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think on our campus, our greatest challenge was just ensuring that we were not cannibalizing our support for general scholarships to implement this program. But I think that because of this program, it has helped create energy towards just giving to our campus in general, and support for our campus in general.
Thank you.
I had a question, a question about students who have started college but for whatever reason dropped out. In North Texas, for instance, these are pretty sound numbers. There are 900,000 adults who don't have a high school diploma, but there are 650,000 adults who started some form of post-diploma work and then dropped out. Have any of you identified, do you have programs that have identified those students, incentivized them back into your universities, and had any success with that? Because it's something I'm working on right now. I'm just curious if anybody's, farther ahead than I am on it.
I'll say I share your struggles. That's a very difficult demographic. We have similar numbers in Georgia, where we know the large numbers of adults who have some college courses but no college degree. We've set up an office that is within our admissions office dedicated to recruiting those students, but we haven't had a great response, to be completely frank. What the retention grants have led us to do is begin to think more intentionally about some of our continuing students that get blocked from re-registering because they have these financial barriers. So they have some kind of balance that comes in because they didn't pay something towards the end of one semester, and finding ways to help some of those students get back on board. Again, what we found when we looked at the data, in some cases, the student burden is unmanageable for us to help with. They owe $15,000 or something. But in other cases, by helping, they've gotten fines, or they had some kind of charge at the end of one semester. By helping them with $300, $500, $800, you can get them back on track again. But for the most part, these are not the adults that you're talking about. They're the true returnees to college.
The Indiana University level institutional research office collected information looking at students who were close to graduation in terms of number of credits and who still resided in the state of Indiana, and each of our campuses then began an outreach to those students to specifically talk with them about how they could complete their degree, in some cases with a very minimal number of credits. So that individual outreach is still ongoing, so I can't report the success. We also at IUPUI instituted a degree completion office to really focus on the population of adults with some college and no degree, and are going out and now starting to market in that area.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Please.
How deep of a dive did you do into the data? So, senior status or a year within graduation, did you just define that by 90 hours, or did you actually look and see, well, they changed majors, so they actually have a lot longer to go? How deep did you dive?
I can give you a sense from our perspective. We looked at, we do both. We do retention early on, which is a little riskier, honestly, and then the completion grants are not nearly as risky. For the completion side, we looked at senior status first, and then we have an advisor verify that a student can reasonably graduate within a year. That's where we start, and then balances generally below $2,000. So not hugely deep, but we looked at that, and that's defined by credit hours, the status.
In our graduation incentive grant iteration, we asked the academic advisor to go through and look at the student's record and verify that they could graduate within a year. That was a significant amount of work, not only for the advisors, but also the tracking the advisor down and getting them to look at the individual record and respond. And so in the home stretch award, we decided that we would just set 80 credits as the minimum, knowing that we were going to catch some students who had credits that were not going to count towards their degree. We tried to, so I mean, there's a cost-benefit ratio there that you have to look at. So if you were assisting some students who indeed were not going to be able to be completed in that year, we were providing them an institutional loan at a very attractive repayment schedule. And so we thought that we were still benefiting those students.
And I guess by your definition, we do take a deep dive. Georgia State's the largest transfer recipient institution in the state of Georgia. So we're about, I think it's 57% of our undergraduates start as transfer students. We have, this fall, we had 2 students who arrived as undergraduates without a bachelor's degree who already brought with them 200 credit hours. So we don't use just the marker of how many credit hours, because we really do want to see which students are making the right choices and progressing through their degree programs. So we had a major advising initiative now 5 years ago, and we're really tracking for every student every semester, not just how many credit hours they have, but how close they are to actually meeting the degree requirements for their individual program. Every advisor is assigned a cohort of students and is responsible every semester for tracking that particular metric. So that is part of what we're looking at, is not just how many credit hours the student has amassed, but are they in the right areas relative to their major, minor concentrations and so forth.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other audience questions? Okay. We're going to wrap up here, and I do want to ask just one final question. Let's give the lovely panel that we've had here a chance to maybe give us a last